It's time now on the Business Breakfast for David and myself to say happy birthday to IBM. The computer company, Big Blue, is about to turn 100 years old, which is a very long time indeed in any industry, particularly the technology industry. And in the studio to talk about how IBM has managed to make it thus far, Bashar, head of IBM's hardware and software group here in the Middle East. Bashar, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Brandy.
And it's lovely to see you. David and I were both saying that, I mean, we started off as IT journalists 10, 11 years ago in the UAE, and we all remember each other from then when we all had a bit more hair and a few less wrinkles.
What do you mean a bit more hair?
Well, I had a bit more hair.
Yes, first meetings, I think, back in 2001, something like that.
How has IBM managed to make it to a century in an industry that's not necessarily known for its longevity?
Yes, it's been 100 years. It started in 1911 with 4 companies coming together to form the Computing, Tabulating, Recording Company, basically doing printers, tabulators, calculators and recording machines. Over the years, it changed its name in 1924 to International Business Machines after expanding into Latin America, China, Europe, outside of the United States. I think the main stations across the journey were probably starting with traffic systems in New York. In the 1930s, we had the biggest accounting operation of all times with the Social Security in the United States. I think another landmark was the airline reservation systems, the integration of all the different booking systems together. What used to take hours was possible to happen in real time, actually. The participation in the NASA mission, Apollo 13, Apollo 11, and of course, coming to the 70s and 80s, changed the way we do retail and we do commerce with the introduction of automated tellers, the barcode, the magnetic stripe, all these things that we use today in our commerce interactions and transactions. The PC in the 80s was a huge hit. IBM introduced the PC and it also published the architecture and opened it for others to build IBM-compatible PCs. So it's been a long journey over the years, but continuously we've had innovations and commitment to needs from the markets and the customers.
I mean, clearly you've had huge successes. I mean, I think you've had 5 Nobel Prize winners working for IBM. But what is it in its culture that has enabled it to survive 100 years? I mean, it's a technology company, first of all, and technology companies aren't known for being particularly enduring. But any company in any sector would be doing amazingly well to still be around after 100 years. And not just around after 100 years, you're actually probably the second most valuable IT company in terms of market cap. So what is it about the culture of IBM that has allowed it to do that?
I think IBM has a very strong culture. People identify themselves as being IBMers. If you look over the years, IBM has invested a lot in its people, viewing it as its main capital. IBM introduced the first group life insurance during the Great Depression, so it took a lot of care about its employees. In the 1930s, IBM had a female vice president. There was a lot of focus on disability, so many disabled people, blind people were able to join IBM and find a career. Equal opportunities across different backgrounds, and I think this was actually 10 years ahead of the US Social Act. As you said, also investment in education. There's also been a consistent culture. IBM over the 100 years only had 7 CEOs. So there's always been continuity and commitment to the people. I think that's been an important factor in IBM's history, and it differentiates IBM in the market as a company. Many of the business schools today have a lot of case studies on IBM's management systems and the case studies on how to manage people, how to manage projects. There's been a culture in IBM that promotes that.
Well, that certainly explains sort of staff loyalty. I mean, I know you were saying earlier you've been there for 16 years yourself. But what about the actual sort of, I suppose, the competitiveness of the company and the financials? Is it flexibility? I mean, we've seen IBM reinvent itself several times from sort of, hardware and the laptops and PCs that we were discussing earlier into consulting and services, and now very much sort of almost the virtual stuff, the cloud stuff.
I think IBM's been moving through a lot of phases over the last 100 years, and as you mentioned, we started with manual machines and then electric machines, but getting into the basics of computing started in the 50s and 60s. At that time, IBM started to use technology to do the computing algorithms and mechanisms. They introduced Fortran, the first programming language. Of course, this all started to develop into what we know as the computer today, but more of that as the business machine, the machine that we use to run our daily business. In the 1960s, IBM made a huge investment in what we call the System 360, which is actually at that time a $5 billion investment, which was the largest privately financed commercial project in history. And that's the basis of the computer as we know it today. And computer became associated with business over the years, and of course that needed that the industry reinvents itself, but also IBM as a company in some cases reinvents itself, and also in some cases also takes a leadership position in driving the next wave of change within the industry. As you mentioned, primarily the focus was on technology, hardware. In the 70s, we moved more into the solutions systems and the infrastructure that goes with it. Many examples on that. And in the 90s, the discussion became very much software. A lot of investment in software, and of course then we moved into the services business with consulting, and today we view ourselves as a very rounded business, very much a business company that has software services as well as systems and technology.
David, I know you personally were a big fan of the ThinkPad, and sad to see it leave the IBM stable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that culturally, obviously IBM has got a very enduring culture, and it's been to be around 100 years means that it's done a lot of things right, but it's also got a few things spectacularly wrong. I think one of the juiciest quotes that's always wheeled out, and you must be really fed up of it, was in 1943. Your chairman Thomas J. Watson said, "I think there is a world market for maybe 5 computers." I think IBM must hate that quote, but perhaps the biggest miscalculation that IBM ever made, and Larry Ellison, who of course is a great friend of yours from Oracle, he said the single worst mistake in the history of enterprise on earth is one that IBM made, and it will be discussed in business schools forever. And what he was referring to was the first IBM compatible computer, the operating system you gave to Microsoft to develop it quickly, and the processor you gave to Intel. 2 companies that then proceeded for a period of time to overtake IBM in terms of market capitalization and really dominated the next decade. And that was really just one tactical decision that IBM made and got spectacularly wrong. And I think that's both, you can see that kind of attitude towards the personal computer space both beforehand and indeed afterwards. I mean, you have got rid of any sort of involvement within the personal computing space. Would you agree that was actually a tactical mistake that you made at that particular time?
I think in the 1980s, IBM did not view the PC as a real component of business computing or business IT, and hence the different outsourcing, if you want to call it, of the processor and the operating system. At the time when IBM developed the architecture and the design for what we know the PC today, IBM expected to sell 240,000 pieces altogether, and within 2 years they sold more than 2 million. So obviously there was some kind of a surprise here, and a different estimation of the market conditions moving on. IBM did what in my view also benefited the industry in a way by publishing the architecture and the design and allowing other manufacturers to actually build a computer to the IBM specifications, which we all know as the IBM compatible PC at that time. Who knows what would have happened if IBM didn't do that? What kind of architecture would we have had, or what kind of revolution or evolution we would have seen in the personal business or in the PC space? So definitely there was a view at that point in time on this particular line of business that wasn't probably shared with the rest of the people in the industry. Moving on, I think everybody knows that in the mid 2005, I think we sold the PC business to Lenovo, which was the company that used to work with us closely on manufacturing them as well. That was also a statement that IBM is not really in the business of personal computers or consumer business, more in the enterprise business and the overall solutions business and services business and software business. IBM at that point in time sold the PC business for several $billions and invested most of that money in software solutions. And of course, everybody knows that software has a very different business model. It allows companies like IBM to provide end-to-end solutions, and of course provide scalability to these solutions at very different margins. And that was a very welcome change from the financials of the company as well.
Could you ever see IBM moving back into the consumer space?
I don't see why not. If you look at the roadmap for 2015, IBM has highlighted 4 different initiatives. And the first one is Smarter Planet. And everything to do with Smarter Planet talks about connectivity, measuring connectivity, and becoming smarter about reaction to alerts, and building in a smarter environment. A lot of this, in my view, has to do with the individual, with the consumer, whether you're talking about smarter cities, smarter airports, smarter schools, smarter banking, smarter retail. So these kind of solutions will always be there, and IBM is going to promote them as one of the main initiatives for the 2015 roadmap.
IBM proved very agile from getting out of building technology, out of building not software, but out of building hardware technology. But do you think it's as easy to go back? Building hardware is now very much dominated by Asia. I don't think you could be as agile in that shift if you ever wanted to move back into that space.
Hardware will continue to be an important part of the IBM business. The investments that we have in the mainframe technology, in the server, in the enterprise server technologies are continue to be leading technologies in the market. Today we've got a leading market share in the enterprise server market, and that's a big market that we will continue to invest in.
But the consumer space?
But in the consumer space today, we're not very active in that particular space. We're more looking at solutions that provide complete software services and hardware environment.
Do you think that's an issue in any way for IBM nowadays? I think it used to be very, very clear what IBM stood for, whereas I think if you speak to most people nowadays, they're not really sure what IBM is. They know it's a very large company, they know it's in the technology space, but the average person doesn't really know what IBM is at all. Does that matter?
I think the average person knows that IBM today is very big in what we call business solutions around IT. Of course, they probably don't have the daily touch with them through the PC or a handheld device, but it's funny to know that most of the handheld devices have some software from IBM, but people don't know that. But coming back to the question, in general, people view today IBM as a business solutions company. And I think that is the positioning that IBM has in the market today.
But to some degree, you've lost that touch with the consumers. I mean, you right from your very history, you always had, a direct touch, whatever it was through, whatever bit of hardware that you had. Whereas nowadays, you're very much a kind of a virtual organisation. You're very much focused on high margin business to businesses and to government organisations. You don't really touch, people like you and I at all. So, it's just, I guess it's a loss of a piece of marketing, really, a bit of a warm touch to IBM.
Yes, and I think we have to compensate for that in different ways of communicating with the audiences and the community that we live in. The centennial celebrations of IBM are part of that. We're trying to be closer to the community. We've started an initiative called the service. We're celebrating service for 100 years. So every employee in IBM today is donating 1 day or 8 hours to community service around the world. We're trying to be closer to the community and the people we're working with and around.
You've moved into consultancy, and I was reading an Economist article quite recently, and what it was saying was that consultants in general are beginning to be on a losing game, for the very simple reason that it used to be the case that a company would hire consultants, they would bring in an army, the job of the consultant would be to get their claws in, never leave, and continue to get billing hours. Nowadays, companies, especially in the kind of more fiscally astute times, people don't want an army of consultants coming into their organisation anymore. They really want the 1 or 2 or maybe 3 brightest guys from the consultancy, not the army of second or third tier employees, and they want them in and out, basically on a project basis. Are you seeing that? Are you seeing any declining revenues from your consultancy business?
I don't see declining revenues from our consulting business is because we continue to innovate and change the value proposition that we provide to our customers. But I agree with you on the fact that skills are very important, and the customers would like to see the right skills on their premises. They have also changed the view that they have regarding how they work with consulting firms. I completely agree with you. Skills and having the right profile is extremely important. The differentiator IBM has in this particular discussion here is that we do have the services arm, a consulting arm, but we are at the same time in a very strong position because we also have the complete solution components, the hardware, the software, and the IT services related to it. It continues to be a very interesting market, and skill and scalability and the access to customer and the relationship makes a huge difference. I agree with you.
Well, on the revenue front, 100 years isn't the only milestone for IBM this year. It's also passed $100 billion in sales this year. What kind of percentage does the Middle East contribute to IBM's revenue? How important is this region in what IBM makes?
Absolutely. The Middle East is part of what we call the emerging markets in IBM. And if I go back to our 2015 roadmap, it has 4 initiatives, as I mentioned earlier. One is Smarter Planet, the other one is Business Analytics, Cloud Computing, and Emerging Markets. The emerging markets in IBM today contribute to something like 20% of the overall revenue. By 2015, we'd like it to be 30%, and 50% of the growth in the emerging of the IBM company's revenue will come from the emerging markets. So there's a huge focus on emerging markets. The Middle East and Dubai in particular is a main player in our emerging market strategy. If you know, in 2008 we moved our head office for what we called CEMEA from Vienna to Dubai. That was a very bold move. It also demonstrated commitment to the region here. So we have our regional hub in Dubai for a huge part of the emerging markets and the growing markets. We're also making geographical expansions in the territory. So in 2006 we opened our office in Saudi Arabia, and we're already looking at other offices in Jordan and Qatar and other parts of the territory here. It's probably interesting to mention that IBM's been in this part of the world since 1946. So the first computer was installed in the Middle East at Aramco in 1946, and the first office was in Bahrain, and the first computer in the government space was in Kuwait in the 1950s. So this region is a very important region for IBM, and we've been here for long time, and it is really strategically also, looking at our 2015 roadmap, an important part of our growth initiatives.
Bashar, Territory Manager for IBM in the Middle East, thank you very much for joining us on the show this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you.